There is a certain point in a champion's run at the top of any given division where they reach a stage that causes many fans to wonder out loud whether the champion question has cleared out their weight class. It usually comes around the time where you start seeing a number of rematches that end in a 2-0 deficit, as well as a shortage of new exciting contenders emerging from the ranks. Now, when it comes to Kamaru Usman and the welterweight division, I don't think that he's quite there yet, but out of all of the UFC's champions right now, he certainly is the closest to getting there, with maybe the exception of Valentina Shevchenko. But even with some very interesting challenges in front of him, in guys who haven't yet broken through, I do think that if he is truly interested in shaking things up, this recent buzz about him moving up 1 or even 2 weight classes has certainly gotten the wheels turning in my brain. Not that I think a move to light heavyweight would make sense really, but we'll get back to that. As the sport's pound for pound number 1 and with 5 title defenses under his belt, Usman has already done enough to warrant his inclusion among the greatest fighters of his era. And I do think that while things certainly got out of hand there for a while with cross-divisional super fights in the wake of Conor McGregor, a well-earned and well-timed super fight is truly a special occasion. I'm not talking about Conor or Israel Adesanya moving up in weight after just 1 or even no title defenses, but take the likes of Chris Cyborg versus Amanda Nunes at 145 pounds. That felt earned. It felt special. It was a collision of 2 well-established champions and divisional number 1s that instantly brought about some pretty heavy vibes as far as the impact it would have on each woman's legacy. I do believe that looking for and having a healthy attitude towards legacy-defining super fights is the key here, an opportunity that was missed when GSP and Anderson Silva were in their prime, or even John Jones and Cain Velasquez. And when it comes to some of the more recent efforts at putting on super fights, the likes of Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya, and even Henry Cejudo versus TJ Dillashaw, while both matchups were certainly intriguing, they came off more as 2 excellent fighters from 2 different weight classes squaring off. And yes, they were interesting stylistic clashes, but they weren't a collision of 2 massive legacies. And I think that that should be the criteria for these super fights. Just look at Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko. Prior to that shocking Juliana Pena defeat, Nunes versus Shevchenko was easily the biggest fight in women's MMA that could have been made, a perfect pairing of seemingly unbeatable athletes with all of the marbles on the table. Even John Jones's potential showdown with Francis Ngannou. Sure, John isn't the champion and Francis only has 1 defense, but Ngannou managed to beat pretty much everyone in the process of rising to where he is now, and Jones's overall legacy as champion would ensure that he lived up to his side of the bargain. And I just think that the word super fight can be thrown out with too much haste, where fighters disrupt the natural flow of their own division without truly proving themselves to be the very best champion they can be. But I do think that out of all of the champions in the men's divisions right now, Kamaru Usman is the one that I would personally like to see make that jump. On a quick side note, if you're enjoying this content and would like to stay up to date with all of our weekly uploads, be sure to subscribe to the channel before leaving a like and a comment to ensure that you're keeping that very same energy for each of our videos. Also, we recently set up a Patreon account, so if you want to help support the channel, the link is in the description. Things were set in motion somewhat by Usman declaring his interest in moving up to light heavyweight, something he would do to avoid fighting Israel Adesanya, who shares his Nigerian heritage. But then, out of nowhere, Usman's manager Ali Abdelaziz offered up an interesting perspective on things. The man, whether you love him or hate him, is oftentimes just as good at promoting his fighters as the promoters themselves. But perhaps his greatest talent of all lies in his ability to secure his athletes the deals and the fights that they deserve. And I did get the sense that this angle, the idea of talking about Usman fighting Adesanya, it was enough to at least plant the seed of possibility in our mind, just days after first hearing that Kamaru was interested in moving up in weight. Abdelaziz basically said that Kamaru and Israel, while indeed connected by their shared Nigerian roots, don't train together or consider each other to be good friends, something that, to him, makes the barriers that exist between them and a super fight not overly consequential. Money talks, and as far as seeing the welterweight and middleweight champions collide, sufficient payment will go a long way in getting these 2 to sign on the dotted line. And I think there's something to this. In a time where more and more we're seeing the fighter pay discussion brought up, and knowing that both Usman and Adesanya are huge fans of Francis Ngannou, who is of course the 3rd African champion under the UFC's banner right now, you never do know how much of a topic this could become once their respective title defenses against Leon Edwards and Robert Whittaker are through. We do often see sometimes in terms of matchmaking how early seeds that are planted can later blossom into full-on media frenzies, and in the case of Adesanya Adesanya versus Usman at 185 pounds, I'd have to agree with Ali in how he sees the potential for their competitive and financial desires to take the reins if they emerge from their next fight unscathed and realize that they've pretty much cleared out their division for the most part. As for a move to 205 pounds, I don't know, it's a bit much. I don't want to see a fighter as talented as Usman at a physical disadvantage, potentially losing to a fighter with inferior skills without even seeing how he holds up at middleweight first. But in terms of Adesanya versus Usman, I think there's real competitive value here. Kamaru is by no means a small 170 pounder, and though I would probably favour Stylebender to break him down with his length and overall dynamism, you never do know. I would refuse to rule out Usman's ability to be great, because as we've seen time and time again, these great ones can always surprise us. So with an eye on one of the end-of-year blockbuster pay-per-views, assuming that both men can defeat their next challenger, do not be surprised if there are rumblings of a 185-pound super fight, because even with their respect for each other being what it is, the earning potential of this one, and the sheer magnetism of it as a main event, I do think that would make it one of the greatest 2 or 3 super fights in MMA history, and it would certainly be one hell of a way to close out 2022. But what do you think of the idea of Usman moving up in weight in an attempt to compete at multiple weight classes? And who would you back to win if he did take on the last Stylebender or the 205-pound champion, depending on who that is? Do let us know your opinions in the comment section below. We always love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thank you for watching.